with missions launched to every planet in the solar system, as well as critical national security, science, weather, and communication satellites. ULA has established a long-standing reputation for reliability and orbit accuracy in the space launch industry. At our launch site in Cape Canaveral, Florida, the story begins with ULA's Atlas and Delta rockets arriving on the RS RocketShip. The RocketShip is a specially designed cargo ship used to transport rockets from ULA's 1.6 million square foot production facility in Decatur, Alabama. RocketShip is large enough to carry a complete Delta IV Heavy rocket. That's 3 boosters, a second stage, and a payload fairing. Once loaded, RocketShip departs ULA's dock and travels through the Tennessee River, then onto the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, then goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. From there, the ship travels through the Atlantic Ocean, around the southern tip of Florida, and north to Port Canaveral. RocketShip was designed with several features to ensure successful delivery, including the ability to adjust its draft for shallow water and rudderless steering, which minimizes the need to tug. Atlas V boosters are transported from the ship to the high bay in the Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center, or ASOC, for final preparations. Delta IV boosters are moved to the Horizontal Integration Facility, or HIF, where they are mated together to form the Delta IV Heavy configuration. With final checks completed, the boosters are transported to the launch pad for Launch Vehicle on Stand, or LVOS. The 107-foot-long Atlas V boosters are brought to Space Launch Complex 41 and are hoisted into a vertical position using a crane and placed onto the Mobile Launch Platform, or MLP, in the Vertical Integration Facility, or VIF. Delta IV Heavy rockets are raised vertically by a fixed-pad erector at Space Launch Complex 37. The fixed-pad erector uses a single hydraulic piston to rotate the boosters 90 degrees inside the Mobile Service Tower, or MST. LVOS is followed by the addition of solid rocket boosters, and then the second stage. Next comes Wet Dress Rehearsal, or WDR, which is an end-to-end launch simulation, from fueling through spacecraft separation. Meanwhile, the ULA team is also working simultaneously to help the customer encapsulate their payload into the rocket's payload fairing. The encapsulated payload fairing is the final piece to be mated to the rocket. With the rocket stack complete, the spacecraft team tests all of the interfaces with the rocket and the launch pad. Once the rockets are completely assembled, final launch preps begin. For Atlas V rockets, launch countdown begins with moving the rocket from the VIF to the pad. The quarter-mile trip uses 6 components to complete the 20-minute trip. Weighing in at about 2 million pounds, the MLP supports the rocket and contains air conditioning, electrical, and commodities, while the undercarriages bear the weight of the MLP and rocket. 2 rail cars lead the move, with the payload van providing communication to the payload, while the ground van houses the ground support for the rocket. At the rear of the convoy, the portable environmental control system provides air conditioning to the payload and rocket. Finally, track mobiles provide the power to move the 3.5 million pound convoy. For Delta IV Heavy rockets, the process looks quite different. Approximately 9 hours before T0, final preparations begin as 40 hydraulic cylinders at pressures nearing 3,500 psi move the 10 million pound MST. It's first raised 8 inches and then rolled back. Delta uses a carriage transporter system, traveling at about a quarter mile per hour. It takes about 25 minutes to roll the MST to its launch position, 345 feet north of the Delta IV rocket. The Delta IV rocket stands 217 feet tall, or about 21 stories, and weighs more than 900,000 pounds fully fueled. On the day of launch, nearly 30 engineers and managers are polled for system status and readiness to proceed.
Status check to proceed with terminal count, Atlas Systems, propulsion.
This is the final status check before launch for all Atlas and Delta vehicle systems, ground systems, the spacecraft, and the U.S. Air Force Eastern Range. The vehicle system readiness poll includes electrical systems, hydraulics, pneumatics, propulsion systems, flight control, and propellants.
Range coordinator. Clear to proceed. Launch director.
Launch vehicle is ready to launch.
Mission director.
This is the mission director. You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count.
If the rocket is ready for flight and the weather is within the launch commit criteria, then polling will be completed and the team will have given the go for launch.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's ignition. And liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket.
For a typical Atlas V flight, the main engine and solid rocket boosters ignite to lift the rocket off the pad. Shortly after liftoff, the rocket begins a pitchover to attain the proper flight path, minimizing the dynamic pressure the vehicle experiences during flight. Within the first few minutes of flight, the vehicle reaches Mach 1, the speed of sound, followed by jettison of the solid rocket boosters. About 4 minutes later, propellant levels deplete and the booster engine shuts down, followed by release of the booster stage. At various times in flight, depending on the mission, the vehicle jettisons its payload fairing. From there, the second stage will continue carrying the spacecraft towards its destination with planned engine starts and stops. Finally, Centaur will release the spacecraft in its target orbit to continue its journey.